Hi everyone, my name is Kristy Hsi and I'm a senior in the college studying English and Criminology. For my Ben Talk, I'll be presenting my findings from my senior English honors thesis, Shifting Cultures and Identities in Asian American Protagonists Coming of Age Stories. Basically, my research is centered on young adult novels written in the late 20th and early 21st centuries with Asian American protagonists who differ from each other in their representations of Asian American heritage in their coming of age stories. Here we have Laura Jean from To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han on the left, and Lynn and Katie from Kara Kara by Cynthia Kadohata on the right. Even from these images, you can tell that they represent Asian Americanness in different ways. In works from the late 1900s and early 2000s, Asian American protagonists have been heavily stereotyped in terms of their appearances and personalities, and their coming-of-age stories depend heavily on the reflection of these stereotypes. In these works, I focus on the meanings behind the Asian American protagonists' constant expression of differences between their backgrounds and current lives, how they bridge the gap between the part of them that is affected by historical events and their Asian upbringing with the part that is rooted in their American identities, and how different generational influences may have played a part in their overall representation. Now, in the 2010s, a shift has slowly begun to occur where more recent Asian American protagonists are being defined by their individual characteristics and traits rather than their race. In these works, I examine how these Asian American protagonists do not put their Asian culture and heritage on constant display, and instead merely mention them in passing or focus instead on reconciling their American identities with their Asian roots and appearances. Their Asianness does not define their characters, it becomes only one aspect of who they are. There seems to be a trend in recent YA fiction for Asian American protagonists to be comfortable enough with their American identities to not constantly make references to and justify their Asian identities. Such a shift is significant in determining how these more recent works may be underplaying Asian American social experiences to counter the overplaying of such seen in earlier works. Throughout all of these works, I look specifically into this delicate balance of what it means to have to fit one's Asian and American heritages together and present a united Asian American identity. To do so, I drew on examples from a few such popular YA novels with Asian American protagonists. The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan, A Step from Heaven by Ann Na, Kira Kira by Cynthia Kadohata, American Born Chinese by Jin Ben Yang, I Believe in a Thing Called Love by Maureen Gu, To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han, and American Panda by Gloria Chow. I separated these 7 works into 2 categories, works from before the shift in characterization and content, which can be seen on the right, and works from after the shift, which can be seen on the left. For the works before the shift, I included The Joy Luck Club, A Step from Heaven, Kira Kira, and American Born Chinese. In these novels, I focus on how prominent stereotypes, changes in environment, and the representation of the double honed in on this idea of Asian difference in the Asian American coming-of-age experience. Prominent stereotypes of Asian Americans pervade most early works of Asian American literature. When young adult novels were first defined and Asian American protagonists were first starting to appear in the late 20th century, Asian American protagonists in YA novels were being portrayed as heavily stereotyped in terms of their appearances, the food they ate, their culture and traditions, their countries of origin, and even their personalities. In these novels, I looked at how some of the Asian American characters were portrayed as the typical chinky-eyed, pale-faced, nerdy misfits of society, and their coming-of-age stories depended heavily on the reflection of these stereotypes and their attempts to overcome these assumptions. Another way in which works of literature from before the shift to overplay Asianness can be seen through the characters' changes in environment. Many of these earlier works are immigrant stories, portraying the experiences of first and 1.5 generation immigrants from when they first moved to America, and the experiences of second generation immigrants during their move from an area that is predominantly Asian American to one that is typically predominantly white American. The placing of these characters in these new environments is a deliberate move by authors to highlight the challenges Asian American protagonists often face in discrimination and assimilation in unknown, sometimes hostile environments, and it gives these characters a chance to both see themselves and those around them as others. In terms of the double, Xiaoling Cynthia Wong writes in her work, Reading Asian American Literature from Necessity to Extravagance, of the idea of the double in Asian American literature. In particular, she introduces the concept of the racial shadow to clarify what a double entails. A racial shadow involves American-born Asian figures projecting undesirable Asianness outward onto double, so that one renders alien what is in fact literally inalienable, thereby disowning and distancing it. In a sense, what Wong is describing here is this idea of a cultural foil in 2 Asian or Asian American characters. Indeed, much of the earlier works of Asian American literature have included 2 Asian American characters who were pitted against one another in terms of their personalities and characterizations, where often one represented the more Asian facet and the other represented the more American facet of the Asian American identity and experience. For the works after the shift, I included I Believe in a Thing Called Love, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, and American Panda. I look at how these works from after the shift differentiated themselves from earlier works in terms of their individual plot and personality and portrayals of family, food, and relationships. Plot and personality-wise, all three of these characters face more American struggles, such as finding boyfriends and hiding friendships and relationships from their parents. They experience more typical American teenager problems that don't involve race and ethnicity. The composition of Asian American families within these novels also mimics the variety of those seen within our society. In To All the Boys I've Loved Before, Lara Jean's family is made up of a father who is a white American, a mother who is a first-generation Korean American, and three daughters who are all American-born Korean Americans. Similarly, Desi from I Believe in a Thing Called Love has also lost her mother and lives alone with her father. Her relationship with her father is portrayed as an interesting dynamic that demonstrates simultaneously the generational gap in families with immigrant parents and American-born children, and a somewhat reversal of roles that are often seen in traditional Asian and Asian American families, where Desi's father takes on the traditional mother role. In contrast to both Lara Jean and Desi, May from American Panda's overly present mother and father act as constant reminders for her of her Asian descent. When it comes to food and the Asian American identity, it is through food that most Asian Americans in general are more willing to acknowledge their ties to Asian culture and connect to it. Yet even within food, a dichotomy arises between the typical lunchbox stories, where Asian American children are shamed for the different smelling Asian food lunchboxes they bring, and the overall American fascination with basic Asian cuisines such as fried rice from China and sushi from Japan. Such opposition and appreciation proves difficult for Asian American adolescents to determine whether or not the Asian food they eat is actually a medium for them to connect to their culture, or just another meal that most American children nowadays would eat. This difficult dichotomy has since been translated to and often explored within literature, and as food is one of the most frequent and essential markers of an Asian American character's existence within a novel, their interactions with the type of food they eat can signify a great deal about their presence, characters, and personalities. And finally, friendships and romantic relationships are one of the most crucial topics to consider within the young adult literature genre. As coming-of-age stories, YA Lit often explores romance and friendships in general, where traditionally romantic relationships follow the route of girl meets boy, girl falls in love with a boy, girl and boy struggle to be together, then girl and boy finally overcome barriers and enter a relationship. However, with many Asian American characters, there has been an added difficulty in the form of race and identity. In my thesis, I explore what friendships and relationships are formed by each of the characters and how they navigate this with their identities. My ultimate conclusion is that there is a clear distinction between works before and after the shift, but all of these narratives across time are valid and important in expanding the range and repertoire of Asian American and YA literature. Thank you so much for listening.